Michaella. I'm a second semester senior at Wellesley, and I'm currently interning at HP. And at Wellesley, I study an individual major in social computing with a concentration in computer science. So today I'm going to be taking you around to actually the last day of my internship, a day in the life for my last day with HP as a UX content and design intern. So it's going to be maybe a little bit different from my daily schedule, but more similar than you would think, and just a little bit crazy and chaotic. So let's go. So my role as a UX content and design intern was actually a little bit different. Instead of being a designer, like working directly underneath like a more senior designer, I'm actually on a team called Omni-channel strategy and tools. So nobody really knows what that means. It's kind of the glue that keeps the company together is what they call it. So they collaborate with the marketing team and photo, the print team, basically everything, which makes it a little bit hard to explain to people, but I'm definitely going to perfect that explanation at some point as I apply to other jobs. But essentially there's actually one UX designer on my team, and so I work underneath him. But instead of designing prototypes or working directly on Figma, my role this summer, my major project was actually to do almost like a design audit. So the term for it, I believe, would be like a UX consultant, basically somebody who goes in and takes a look at some sort of product that a company is working on and then evaluates how well that product is adhering to standardized user experience guidelines based on research and based on data. So I was using a third-party organization called the Baymart Institute, which does a bunch of UX research, I think 67,000 plus hours of user testing, especially with like the one-on-one think aloud protocol. And so I use their research and then apply it to what my team is currently working on, which is called a playbook. The playbook is essentially, which I will show, the playbook is essentially a tool for HP's partners, like partner vendors, to go in and grab information about each of their products. So basically there's direct to consumer companies or direct to consumer sales, and then like business to business type of companies like HP. So HP does a little bit of both. For example, if you were gonna buy a Mac from Apple, a lot of times you'll go into the Apple store, or you could also get it from Amazon or even Best Buy, I believe. Whereas for HP, there aren't really like HP stores or Microsoft stores. They don't have a brick and mortar shop. They sell all of their products through partners. So that's why the playbook is actually a really important tool that HP has, because it's going to allow the company to kind of standardize the way that they want their products formatted in terms of the product pages on, say, Best Buy or Walmart or Office Max and other places where you buy HP laptops and printers. So the playbook that I was working on was featuring one version of HP's personal computers. So one thing that's been really cool with my role at HP this summer is that it's remote. That's a blessing and a curse in some ways. Really fortunate because it allowed me to work from anywhere this summer and not have to relocate to Houston, Texas, which is my home base, my office. I've never been to the office. I've done a virtual tour of it. And then the other drawback of working remotely would definitely be struggling to feel very connected to my team or to other interns at the company. HP is a huge company, so it's kind of easy to feel lost, I guess, especially when you're working remotely and you haven't had any face-to-face interactions with any of your colleagues. Like, you can schedule a meeting, of course, to talk to people, but people are busy, so if you don't really have like anything important or particularly like pressing to say, then it can almost feel a little uncomfortable to ask for people's time. So I would definitely say that that is one drawback, and I'm excited to see what working in the tech industry in person will be like. Okay, so I actually started out this morning with a presentation of my work this summer, just because it is my final day. This is actually the third or second time that I've done this presentation, just because I first presented it for my team, and my manager loved it a lot, and so wanted me to share it with a couple of other teams, I believe marketing and then one other. So that presentation went well. I wouldn't really be able to show it. It was just me presenting on my findings, or the most important findings of the report that I did. But this is an example of, I guess, like what a company PowerPoint would look like. They have a tool for you to get like any sort of template that you need for a PowerPoint or a report, to follow the company's like design system and color scheme really easily. So that made it pretty easy for me in terms of just like how to do my headings and the colors, and everything like that. Essentially, what I'm working with is like a Figma file of my supervisor, like my the UX designer who I'm shadowing under, of his design. So essentially what my work kind of looked like, I have it all open right now, which is great because that's exactly what the last day of an internship would be, right? Just cleaning up the areas that need to be cleaned. I have a few more things to add to the final report, but essentially I would use, frankly, the tabs that I currently have open, and I would go into the Baymard Institute, and look at different subsections that would apply to my team's project. So for example, I can go to all of the guidelines just to demonstrate. They have themes and industries that you can look into. And so the overall theme for what I'm doing obviously is product page, because I'm literally helping design or giving feedback on the design of what HP would like the product page to look like on their partner vendors' websites. So I can either go through the theme of product page, or what I ended up doing really was starting with the industries. And so I was looking at business to business as well as electronics and office, since HP sells electronic equipment. So once I go into here, I then kind of have to like look at the subtopics. So for the most part, again, I would be looking at product page within the topic of electronics and office, or if I went to business, then I'd be looking at product page, again, within the topic of business to business, and then I would go look at which guidelines would actually be useful and apply to the playbook, because not all of them would. So for example, user reviews, that's something that would be generated by the partner company's website. So for example, HP isn't in charge of the user reviews that come out, or how to format user reviews. So for example, I wouldn't be using the guidelines within the user review section, just because that is something that's going to be generated on the side of HP's partner companies. I want to focus on the product page layout and features, product descriptions, and other content that goes into the product page. So that's kind of how I would go in and narrow down what I need. Even within some of these subcategories, not everything is going to be completely relevant directly to what I'm doing. So for example, guideline 835, this might actually this might have been included, but let's see. Harmonize vendor supplied specs to ensure consistency and uniformity. That's something that obviously in this case I wouldn't be using for the playbook, because the playbook is the vendor supplied specification. So that would be something more if someone maybe at Best Buy or Walmart was going to do this project, that's maybe a guideline that they would look for. Whereas that's not super useful. So I would go in, look at the guidelines, think about what's useful, and then I can grab an example actually. Okay, consider structuring product descriptions by product highlights. That's definitely something that ended up being in my final presentation in my report. So I would look at the details of these findings and like look at what the users had to say during user testing examples. And then I would go in and evaluate, you know what, based on that, how well is the playbook doing? And you can see that they had designed the playbook on Figma, which is just like a super common platform to use. I had to try to keep myself organized by just putting the guidelines into subsections, like writing my own notes in red, writing the quotes from the Baymard Institute in normal text, color, black, and then figuring out how to distill that and get it finally into my report, which I won't just scroll through in detail because it's not super important, and also includes some things that belong to HP, but this is essentially what the report will look like. The table of contents is not done yet because it's something that I need to update absolutely last once I figure out every single guideline or element that's going to be in the report. So I'm originally from Boston, but moved to Southern California at the beginning of the spring semester. So the weather's been really warm. It's been like a really nice change. And I'm working from home. So essentially you just saw me speaking from one of the common areas in my apartment building because I needed to escape my dog, who's a puppy and very annoying and likes to bark at me while I'm working because he's upset that people won't throw the ball. But right now I'm going to take a lunch break and go back into my apartment. Okay, so I just realized that I could have done a Zoom recorded call this whole time and then switch between screen share, but that's okay. So I typically try not to work while eating lunch just because I don't think that it really helps you save time. I think you just end up dividing yourself between both activities again and again. But today is today's a very busy day because I want to get everything done since it's the last day of my internship. Technically, I'm sure if I needed to keep some stuff for Monday, today's Friday, for Monday or like early next week, it would be fine because my last internship task will actually be next Wednesday. Because HP is such a big company, again, it's kind of hard to get everybody in one place at the same time for bigger meetings. So essentially next Wednesday, I'll be presenting my work to the vice president of our division, not the vice president of the company. I kind of thought that at first when they mentioned it and I was really nervous, but apparently HP actually has 50 different divisions. So this is the vice president of go-to-market strategy, Omni-channel, I believe. That should be the name. Nobody quote me on that, but there are a lot of them. So next Wednesday, even though my internship is ending today, just happened to be the only day that they really had available to get everybody who needs to be in that meeting. So I agreed to come in after my contract ends and present on my work. So I can talk a little bit about how I ended up finding the current role that I'm in. I was during the school year, part of a program called Black Venture Capital Consortium. And so it's interesting because HP doesn't have a ton to do with venture capital, but there's a story behind this. So essentially, Black Venture Capital Consortium, BVCC, has a curriculum program where they teach you either UX design, software engineering, skills, venture capital, or there's one more cohort and I really can't remember the name, but it has something to do more closely to venture capital. And then there's like a pitch competition. You're placed in teams with one person from each cohort, and then you compete for a prize. My team actually did happen to win the second pitch competition, I believe. I won an iPad, yay. And I was the designer for that team. So I was doing the UX design cohort. And then outside of that program, they have an internship program where you apply. This was back in, I want to say September. I applied to the BVCC internship program. And so essentially, once you're into that program, they guarantee you placement at a company. Basically, they will send you like to interviews at the different companies that they partner with. Most of them are startups, since it's mostly about venture capital. Typically, people like in my program would have been working at like a small startup, but they actually happen to partner with HP. So essentially I was accepted, I believe maybe in October November, I think October, to the Black Venture Capital Consortium internship program. And then that kickstarted the interview process and application process to the partner companies. I still had to apply to HP just like anybody else, like literally like through the HP link. It wasn't like an automatic placement or anything of that sort, just because both like the company needs to want you, and then you also need to want to work at that company. So for example, you could interview at 5 companies, A through E. Yes, A through E. And really have only liked company B versus maybe company C liked you the best. So there might be like a little bit of bartering or kind of back and forth. For my process, it ended up being really short in that HP was the first company that I interviewed with, and they wanted me and I wanted HP. So I didn't actually end up having a very traditional interview process or like hiring process where I applied to multiple companies. This was the only one I ended up applying to. And I think I had other interviews maybe scheduled and then had to cancel those ones after I accepted the HP role. So I knew about this role pretty early. I think before the spring semester, I knew about this role. And they told me ahead of time that it would be remote. So I knew that I wouldn't have to move to Austin, Texas, which helped me in my decision to move to Southern California with my partner and my dog, because I knew that I'd be able to be here for the spring semester as well as the summer. So as I understand it, for UX design, you'll typically want a virtual portfolio to go through some of your design work in the past during the interview process. My interview was again a little bit non-traditional in that it was mostly me just kind of talking about my past work. I might have shown, I believe my supervisor right now is the person who had interviewed me, and I might have shown him like some of the work that I did in actually CS220, human computer interaction with that team, which was really fun. And then maybe I showed him a little bit of my work with BVCC or talked about it like in the curriculum program. But for the most part, it was pretty much us talking about just like UX design in general and the type of project that the team would be looking for. The project that he thought that I was going to be doing is exactly what I ended up doing so many months later. I remember him mentioning this word playbook and kind of being like, we're going to explain it. At the time when he explained it during the interview, I thought it was a totally different thing than what not totally different thing, but a pretty different thing from what it ended up being. And then I think that they ended up kind of coming up with the Baymard idea of me doing more like, not UX research, but compiling UX research and sort of distilling it into the report that I made. That task or that project, I think they came up with a little bit later, which is natural that a lot of the times when a team is hiring you, to my understanding, they might not know exactly what project that you're going to be working on. They might just give you an example of a past project.
So essentially at this point, I'm just going to be cleaning up the final version of the report that I'm turning in, and then sending that and some PDFs of the guidelines and my slide deck to everyone who came to my morning meeting today. And yeah, that is essentially it. So the first part where I talked about how to get the guidelines for the report, honestly, that was kind of the vast majority of the actual internship, was a lot of reading and just kind of like analyzing the prototype that my team has so far. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope that this was helpful in understanding what a day in the life of a very remote, very virtual intern looks like.